How's it going, everybody? I hope you guys are doing well. Today I have a very cool build for you guys. I have a giant whiteboard that I made for my sister, and today I'm going to show you how I built it. I designed this whole project using Fusion 360. I played around with their animation function in order to better explain and show you guys exactly the parts that I'm working on. I've edited the file to account for the stuff that I've missed during the designing process, and I'll fill you in more about that later. But for now, we're going to be moving on to the project, and we'll start by cutting all the horizontal pieces on the CNC. So everything's set up. We're about to run the file. However, this is a very last minute project, so I made the files very fast. So hopefully everything cuts perfectly and nothing goes wrong. But there's only one way to find out. So let's do it. If only he knew the amount of headaches he was about to face. Man, this project was unexpectedly complicated. But back to the project here, I have a long offcut of 3/4 inch plywood that I cut all the horizontal pieces on. These came out really clean. That's the benefit of using a compression bit. Like, I haven't sanded this at all, and it's basically ready to use. If you couldn't tell, I was really happy on how those turned out. So moving on, I'm going to be cutting all the vertical pieces now on another scrap piece of plywood on the CNC. These are going to be the side pieces, so I cut them oversized so I can then put an angle on them which matches the angle of the top and the bottom pieces. Well said, my friend. Only these 3 of the 5 vertical pieces are going to be taking an angled cut. I quickly mocked up the whiteboard so I can visually see which direction the angle needs to be cut. And this piece goes extra piece. Only 3 pieces need the angle cut. It's going to be this piece, and this piece. I set the angle of the table saw blade to 87 degrees and carefully cut all the angles. Once all the angles are cut, I can then flip the pieces over and cut them to their final widths. So far, we're doing pretty good. But here's where things started getting finicky. It's now time to cut the rabbets. Because I chose to use 3 panels for the back instead of 1, I had to cut 2 different depths. 2 vertical pieces will have an 1/8 inch rabbet on both sides, and the 2 outer ones will take a 5/8 rabbet. The top and bottom pieces are also going to be taking a 5/8 inch rabbet, marked here in red. Granted, if I would have just taken my time designing this thing in Fusion in the first place, I could have had the CNC do all this work for me. But unfortunately, I did not,
And here we are, carefully marking all the locations for the rabbets. And originally I planned on cutting these on the router, but if everything was a sign of anything, the router table also decided to break. So instead of trying to fix the router table, I decided to cut the rabbets using the table saw. I stuck a scrap piece of plywood to my fence to avoid damaging it. I also switched out the table saw blade for a dado stack to make it easier for me to cut the rabbets. With all of the setup completed, I can finally cut the rabbets. This is definitely not the easiest nor the safest way to cut rabbets. It gets very sketchy, especially cutting the smaller pieces, so I definitely don't recommend using this method to cut rabbets. I was being very attentive and careful and making sure to cut very shallow. Now if you are going to cut rabbets on the table saw, the much better and safer way to do it is to cut the rabbets flat on the table saw and not vertical like this. I don't know for the life of me why I didn't do this, but that is definitely a much better way to do it. The top and bottom pieces need some cleaning up because of the curvature of the blade, so I went ahead and grabbed a chisel and a hammer and just chipped away at it slowly.
All the pieces are in front of me now, and I'm just gonna do a quick sand before assembly so they're all smooth and it's easier now. Okay, let's put this together.
I used 23 gauge pin nails and some wood glue to quickly put this thing together. I started on the left side of the whiteboard because it had a lot of structure for me to build upon. I also planned on having a natural finish, so I made sure to wipe off any excess glue with a wet paper towel. It's easier to remove all the glue squeeze out now rather than having to go to all of the nooks and crannies when the glue is dry and hard. I added some clamps on the parts that needed it and left it to dry. With a smooth glue up completed, everything didn't really seem so bad, which meant that I could move on and cut the French cleats. I ripped an offcut of 1/2-inch plywood into 2 equal pieces. I can then set my blade to a 45-degree angle and adjust my fence to make sure I cut in the middle of the boards. This yielded 2 sets of French cleats, or 4 identical pieces, 2 that goes on the wall and 2 that goes on the whiteboard. I cut them to their final widths and proceeded to drill pocket holes. It is now the next day, and the glue had plenty of time to dry. I used an easily sandable filler to fill in all the nail holes.
I just finished filling the nail holes. I'm gonna let it dry for a bit, give it a quick sand, and it should be ready for a clear coat.
since we pre-sanded all the parts before assembly. I only had to sand the filler and made sure all the parts are flush. With the sanding complete, I can then move on to putting the final finish. I used 2 coats of polyacrylic, making sure to sand in between coats. With the frame completed and left to dry, I want to talk to you about how I made the back panels. I cut a small sheet of dye bond, which is going to have the calendar and the cork stuck to it. I also cut the back panel for the shelves with the same piece of dye bond. I used one of the shelves to determine the width of the panel. The magnetic whiteboard is going to be made out of the sheet metal that I carefully marked and will be cutting with an angle. And that, my friends, is our whiteboard almost complete. I can move on to the final step, which is attaching this to the wall. Unfortunately, since this was a surprise, she does not have the room for it yet. So I'm going to temporarily install it in my bedroom where the walls are extremely bare. Normally, I would use a nice hefty screw like this to screw right into the stud, but since it's going to be a temporary install, I'm just going to be using some smaller ones so I don't have to plug up such big holes. I used a level to make sure the first cleat goes on straight and went ahead and pre-drilled some holes and drove in the screws, making sure to hit a stud every time.
So this other cleat would go around here, but since this isn't its permanent home, I'm gonna hold off because I don't want to fill all those holes. One is definitely enough to hold this in place, but 2 cleats won't hurt anybody.
French cleats are great because they just slide right into place. I added some nice gold hooks as a finishing touch, and that is our project complete.
So that's it. That's the project and the video complete. I am very happy on how it turned out. My sister also really liked it, so that's always good. And I think that is it for me today. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I hope it inspired you to make something kind of like this. If so, let me know in the comments. And yeah, hopefully, more to come. I'm working on some more projects and trying to put them together as fast as I could, but still trying to get the hang of things. So if you did enjoy, make sure you subscribe and tune out for more, and I'll see you guys later. Thanks for watching.